Okay, so I've been seeing a lot of mixed reviews for Rise of the Ronin, and I feel like the negative reviews aren't really justified. I think this game is just simply phenomenal. If you want a summary for the rest of the video, that's the summary. This game is really freaking good. Okay, you should go play it. That's my opinion. If you like open world games, if you like deep combat systems, this is a really good game. Go play it. If you want to stick around and kind of get a deeper analysis from me about why the game is so good, stick around and I'll kind of break down what I think this game does really well, because I think this is arguably the best open world game released this year. The only game I have not played this year that's open world is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I know that's a really big release. That's a big game to forgo. So I'll play that probably later in the year. I have a pretty big backlog right now, but right now I just want to talk about why why Rise of the Ronin is so freaking good. Okay, so let's jump into it. The first thing I really want to touch on is graphics. This game has been getting a lot of flack about how it looks like a PS3 game, how it looks like the game should have been released 12 years ago, 13 years ago. No, that's not true. Maybe you can argue that when you're in the really big cities, but even then, like I don't think the game looks as bad as people are saying it does. Especially when you're kind of just roaming the open world, you're walking through these grassy areas with a lot of foliage, and you're trying to make your way through all the shrines. The shrines are like kind of like a collectible. The game looks phenomenal. It's got beautiful vistas. A lot of the temples and stuff that are housed in the game are on top of cliffs, and you get this beautiful view of the sea, and it's just so pretty. And I don't understand why people think this game is like a PS3 era game. Sure, it doesn't look as good as Ghost of Tsushima, but it's different, right? Like Ghost of Tsushima maybe went for the more heavier color palette, like a more diverse color palette. Rise of the Ronin sticks to maybe a couple colors, but that's okay. That's the art style they chose, right? And within that art style, I think they did a really, really good job. It might seem a little bit more drab, a little bit more cold, but that's what they were going for. That's what the developers really wanted you to, experience. So I think they did a really good job with the graphics. The one aspect I think where the game lacks a bit are facial rendering and facial details. You don't really see any micro expressions or anything like that. But that's okay, right? Like the rest of the game does every other aspect so well. These minor nitpicks shouldn't really, negate you from playing the game. I think you would do yourself a disservice if you said, okay, this game doesn't look good. Even if you think it doesn't look good, the rest of the game is so good, right? The combat system's really good. The RPG mechanics are really good and very different from most RPGs that I play. And don't let graphics be the sole what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, don't let graphics be the sole reason why you don't play the game, right? It's a really good looking game in my opinion regardless, but even if you think it doesn't look good, it's still worth playing. Let me talk a little bit about the open world, because I feel like this is a good way to transition when it comes to graphics. The open world in general, like if I was just to take an average of all the locations and sum it up into one score, I think I would give it a 9 out of 10. Right? The open world I think is really beautiful. The one section that I think lacks are the cities. And I know you've probably seen a lot of videos talking about how the cities look a little dry. There's not a lot of NPCs. The NPC thing doesn't bother me as much. I think there's a sufficient amount of NPCs when I'm walking around the cities. It's not like something I actively notice. I'm not actively thinking, okay, there's like no one around. And it's not super detailed. The cities aren't super detailed, and here's why. This is my guess, by the way. I think the cities, they on purpose made less detailed because the game starts to chug a lot. And I suspect that originally when they created the game, created the cities, they were a lot more detailed, and then they took away a lot of the detail because of the frame rate drops that you experience when going into the cities. Specifically because of the amount of NPCs in cities. I know I just said that there's not a lot of NPCs in the cities, but the amount that there are, I think still causes the game to start chugging. Here's the big, thing that I notice when I'm going into cities. I'm going through the open world, I'm, doing collectibles, I'm fighting enemies, whatever. I find the rest of the open world to be so dense in terms of the foliage that's rendered in terms of the amount of detail and, the even the roads, the stuff on side of roads and all of that's like very detailed. As soon as I go into cities, that detail starts vanishing, right? And I think it's almost like two different games. It's almost like I'm playing maybe a game from like late PS4 era to a game that might be even older, like a late PS3 era game. And that's where I suspect people are starting to say like, okay, this is a PS3 looking game. That's not true. I think parts of this game, you can argue, look like it's a PS3 era game, but not the whole game. Most of the game looks really, really good. So generally the open world, I think, looks really good. There's 3 different areas that you can kind of, explore. I initially didn't know this. I thought it was just going to be really one big open world, and then I was kind of placed in the Edo region. And then I was like, oh, okay, so it's kind of broken up. It's kind of like The Witcher, where, you start off in a section of the world, and then you're there's a loading screen in between, and then you go to another section of the world, etc., etc. So, 3 different areas that are kind of separated out by 3 different chapters of the game. I think every single area is really pretty. I don't think there's a lot of uniqueness between the areas, to be completely honest, but I think they're good enough. I didn't have any issues with the open world itself in terms of the actual design of it. Next up, let's talk a little bit about the mission structure. So it's not like Elden Ring, where the dungeons are a part of the open world and you kind of just walk into the dungeon, you do the dungeon, and you walk out, no loading screen in between. The way the missions work in this game is, if you wanted to start a side mission, for example, they're called bond missions, where you create bonds with these NPCs throughout the world, and you can kind of do missions for them. Let's say I wanted to start a bond mission. I go up to the NPC, I talk to the NPC, I press start mission. Then it will load me into a part of the open world that will temporarily be closed off from the rest of the open world. This is something I have mixed feelings on, because I get it. They want to create like a Neo-like mission structure for those specific missions, where you jump into the mission, you complete the mission, and then you're done with the mission, and then you go back into the open world. Neo had like individual mission sets, and that's kind of what they, I think, are trying to do with this game, which the missions are separated from the rest of the world. I think it's fine, because if you want to experience that like exploration, then you loop around the mission area and then you open up a shortcut. That kind of mission structure is mostly only possible. Well, I can't even say that it's only possible in separated areas, because Elden Ring did it well. So yeah, honestly, I think they maybe should have just stuck to keeping everything open and allowing the player to choose whether or not they want to stay in the mission or leave. I do enjoy the freedom of will. So I don't know if that was like the proper path to have taken, but that's how the mission structure works. You choose for yourself if you're kind of okay with that. So I know I touched a bit on side quests, so let's keep going down that route. Side quests are generally good. Sometimes they're just like fetch quests a little bit, which is fine. I really enjoyed games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, so fetch quests and stuff aren't exactly the biggest deal to me. I like, going through map markers and kind of doing the collectathon thing. It really satisfies, the lizard brain part of my brain, right? So I really enjoyed that, but I can understand people having issues with the side quests and thinking like, okay, these side quests are too bland. That being said, there are some side quests which have a ton of dialogue, a ton of story, especially the side quests in the second region that have to do with, like, I'm not going to spoil too much, but it has to do with, curing tuberculosis and kind of collecting things for that. And I know that might make you think it's like just a collectathon, but it's not. There is some interesting lore in that aspect of the game. So some side quests are well done. Others are okay. They're not like the most interesting in terms of story. So yeah, there's those missions are called bond missions, where you make friends with NPCs, and then those NPCs will ask you to do specific things. There are also random encounters. Think of like Red Dead 2, when you're just going down the street and you kind of see or hear somebody say something on the side of the road, and you go up to it and it's a guy that's been bitten by a snake. I would think along those lines, except in this game it's not as diverse in terms of the actual things that are happening. It doesn't feel as handcrafted. There's a couple of things that could happen. Someone's either attacking a civilian and you have to fight off the people who are trying to mug the civilian, or there's somebody who thinks that there's a really evil big guy in the middle of the city and you are asked to follow him so you could go fight that big guy. And then there's also like a wolf you can follow to a like an item or something like that. Just very, I guess, repeatable kind of random encounters. They're not very diverse, but that was fine by me as well. Again, the lizard brain part of me really, like checking things off a list kind of situation. So I enjoyed that. There's also shrines, I would think, along the lines of Ghost of Tsushima, but not as well done. Sometimes they're just smack dab in the middle of the world and there's not really always a mountain you have to climb to get to the shrine, right? Ghost of Tsushima, I think, did it really well when it came to the shrines and temples or whatever they called it in that game. In this game, they're a little bit more dry, but I still enjoyed it. There's also cat collection. I like this way more than I should have. I'm a dog person myself, but a lot of my friends have cats. So as soon as there's an animal in the game, I'm like, heck yeah, I'm all about this. So the cat collection I actually really enjoyed. There's a couple of animations that will play out when you go up to a cat, pet it, and then the cat will kind of scratch at you sometimes and then go away, or sometimes it'll cuddle a bit with you and then go away. It sounds really goofy, but I enjoyed that aspect of the game a lot. So take that as you will as well. I really like the animal aspects of games like this. I really enjoy petting the dogs in Red Dead. That was like one of the favorite parts of that game for me. So, as soon as you put in a cat or a dog or something in games, I'm hooked. There's also outposts. I would think like in the line of along the lines of like Assassin's Creed outposts, where you have to go in, clear the outposts, and then maybe civilians will kind of take over the place after that. I really, really enjoyed these. The reason being, you can approach the outposts in a variety of ways. You can go guns blazing. Well, that's another we'll touch on that later, by the way. There's guns and stuff in the game as well, but you could go in, swords and guns blazing, be really loud, take on enemies, or you can do kind of sneaking around, one-hit killing enemies. I enjoyed both aspects so much that outpost clearing was one of my favorite aspects of the game. By the way, it's not called outpost. It's called, forget what it's called in the game, but basically you go, it's very similar to the likes of Assassin's Creed and outposts in that game. Okay, so combat and gameplay. This is what you've been waiting for. This is the best part of the game, probably. I enjoyed this and exploration the most out of any other aspects of the game. Those two things I enjoyed the most. So combat. You can use a variety of weapons and a variety of stances per weapon, okay? So there's really big weapons like great swords and odachis, and then there's smaller weapons like twin blades and sabers that will be much quicker. And the game relies on this kind of parry system, right? So I would think kind of like Sekiro, but not as parry heavy as Sekiro, right? So dodges are still really important. I think it's a combination of maybe Neo and Sekiro. Maybe a game in between that would be this game in terms of the combat system. I enjoyed the parry mechanic a lot, but I found there was one fault with it. Sometimes there are these red flash attacks that you have to parry. The time between the flash itself and those red attacks and the when you're supposed to actually press triangle to parry it, that time can vary depending on who you're fighting. I don't like this because it gives off a lack of consistency between the flash itself and when I'm supposed to press the button. Eventually, you learn that, the flash is important to indicate that the person's about to attack, but what's more important is when the blade is actually coming down onto your person, onto the protagonist. So later on, you'll kind of realize that you shouldn't 100% depend on that flash. You should more depend on when the actual blade from that enemy is coming down onto your protagonist. So keep that in mind. That took me a really long time to realize because initially when the game explains it, it's saying you have to press it right after the flash, which is not always true. It'll be too quick sometimes if you press it right after the flash, so remember that. When it comes to the weapons themselves, you can also use ranged weapons. So I talked a little bit about the melee weapons. I won't spoil all of them, but there's also ranged weapons. There's bows, there's also rifles, and there are also pistols. I might be missing some. I'm not going to spoil one of the weapons because that I think is story related, and you'll get it as like a part of a research quest, right? So yeah, so there's a good amount of variety in terms of like what you can actually use. You can customize your character a good bit. That includes even like armor, and let's talk a bit about that. Let's talk about the RPG mechanics. So it's not like an RPG in the traditional sense where you know level up strength individually, intelligence, dexterity individually. Those get leveled up automatically based on the skills you want to level up. So, for example, let's say I really want to level up the amount of health I receive when I take my health consumable. I would have to level up, I think it's intelligence for that one. I might be wrong, don't quote me on that. But if you want to level up that perk, intelligence will automatically be leveled up as you level up that perk. The perk that will allow you to get more health per consumable. That's how it works for strength. That's how it works for dexterity. That's how it works for intelligence. All of I think there's like 5 or 6 individual like main level up, or 4. There's 4. I was wrong. There's 4 main individual level up, I guess subjects: intelligence, strength, dexterity. What's the last one? Intelligence, strength, dexterity. There's one more. I can't remember it. I went for strength build, so the perks that I've been focusing on throughout my gameplay have been primarily strength. Yeah, so RPG mechanics aren't like standard in that sense either. And then let's talk a little bit about the armor. The armor looks amazing. Every single armor set is like beautiful, and I have a really tough time kind of sticking to one because it looks so good. I want my character to look, badass the whole time, so I'm trying to make sure I maybe stick to one style, but it's really hard to do because I love all the armor sets, right? There's samurai armor sets, and then there's also like Western armor sets, like Western officials outfits and stuff like that. So the armor sets are really good, and there's also a mechanic where you can kind of choose whatever armor you want to put on, but the appearance will stick to whatever armor set you choose in your like home base. So it's not like you have to put on the armor set that will give you the proper skills and you have to stick with that look. You can kind of, choose what you want to look like separately and then choose the armor sets you want to help, do your build in terms of like if you want to focus on crit or whatever. You can choose like the armor pieces for that. And so for weapons, each weapon will have multiple stances that you can utilize. The stance system is very interesting. I like it, but sometimes I forget to use it because I don't think it's always super important, at least on the normal difficulty. I'm not playing on, midnight or whatever, it's twilight or whatever difficulty. So depending on the person you're fighting, whoever you're fighting, the boss might have a heavy weapon or like a odachi or something, and they might have a specific stance that they use. You can switch your stance and choose a stance that is specifically strong against odachis in that stance, right? So if I'm using twin blades, for example, I might want to choose a lower stance because that stance is going to be more effective against odachis in their higher stance. That mechanic is, I think, decently done. I try to stick to whatever the opponent is weak against, and you're also there's some perks in the game that will reward you for utilizing the stance that the opponent is weak against. So yeah, I think the RPG mechanics are done really well. The combat system is probably the best part of the game. In summary, guys, I'm not going to take too much longer, kind of drilling down that this game is awesome, because you've kind of gotten an idea of how much I love this game, right? I think it's rare that a game isn't universally loved and is this good. Most of the time, games that are this good are universally loved, right? And I think this is going to end up being one of those games where 10 years from now maybe, or 5 years from now maybe, people are going to be like, you guys need to go back and play this game. It's really good. This reminds me a lot about when Days Gone released. I know it didn't have the best reputation when that game released, but Days Gone was really good. Right? And now people are like, go back and play that. Play it on PC because it's released there. But yeah, I think Rise of the Ronin is in like a similar situation right now, because it's really, really freaking good, but no one's willing to kind of talk about. I will say, I didn't start understanding how to enjoy the game until I was about 13 hours in. And being 40 hours in, I think now that was worth it. But the initial 13 hours, it took me a while before I was like, oh, this is how the combat works. Oh, this is how I'm supposed to go about exploration. Oh, this is kind of, you know, how important this character is and why the politics matter here, this, that, and the other. Story's not the most important, but it's interesting enough. It's passable. But yeah, guys, just go out there and play the game. I think this is a really good game that's not getting the praise it deserves. This is the best open world game I've played this year. Dragon's Dogma 2 was good, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I'm enjoying this game. And as far as I know, this game doesn't have any microtransactions or anything like that. As far as I know. Go play it. It's really good. If you like this video, maybe give me a like. If you like this kind of content where I kind of talk about just video games in general, give my honest kind of casual thoughts, maybe give me a subscribe, and I'll keep you guys updated with whatever releases next. The next game I'm going to talk about is probably Stellar Blade or Octopath Traveler 2, because Octopath Traveler 2 I've been playing here and there, and then Stellar Blade is coming out I think next week or the week after that, and I'm super excited for it. Love the demo. So if you want to see some content on that stuff, give me a subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. Take care. Bye.